Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster. If you've been following us on social media, you'll know me and Dallas have been living our best lives covering the Edinburgh International Film Festival once again, and we can now bring you our first wave of interviews. So over the next hour and a half, you'll get to listen to Danny Boyle, Sasha Collington, Richard Dreyfuss, Nicole, Palo, Shelagh, McLeod, Dickie, Ninian, Doff, and Robert Budreau. You'll get a wee mini introduction before each interview from me and Dallas to guide you through. But we'll be back next week to talk even more about the festival, but for now, enjoy this diverse range of interviews, and thanks to all the talent for getting involved and talking with us. So here we go, take it away, Dallas.
During the festival, we were delighted to welcome our first Academy Award winner onto the Filibuster. Star of Jaws and Close Encounters, Richard Dreyfuss, was in Edinburgh for the world premiere of Astronaut, the story of an octogenarian who enters a lottery to win a seat on the first commercial spaceflight. I was lucky enough to sit down with Richard and writer-director Shelagh McLeod to talk about the film. Quick spoiler warning, we do discuss elements of the ending of the film towards the end of the interview, so be prepared. Enjoy.
That everyone in the world wants to know how people make movies. And they're all of them in the world are as fascinated and tripped up in a state of hypnosis about movies. There's never been an art form that's so overwhelmed an entire culture the way film has.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So that there's a real desire to find people for a podcast like that who can tell you how and why and when. And you ever think about that? And there are real, it's an opportunity that has yet to be taken by the people who make these podcasts.
Yeah, because usually it's just sort of two guys in a room talking about what they thought of the film, and it's always great to get, the real life experience of it. Because I remember sort of growing up watching Star Wars, and it was a movie, and it blew my mind. But it wasn't really until you sort of grew up to an older age that you realised that there was people who made these movies. They just came to you fully assembled. But it's about how it's put together. Exactly.
The journey of having it made. How it made.
Yeah. So I worked with Truffaut. And he came up with Auteur. So on the day I met him, I walked over to him and shook his hand and said, Auteur is nonsense. And we just went at it. Because it's my belief that actors and that directors are asked more questions than any other occupation other than President of the United States. And he has to create a thing from the input of many, many, many expert people. And he sees the final shape, but his final shape is based on their work. And
100% agree to that.
You can't do it alone. You can't.
Because the writer-director, as yourself, will have this idea, but I guess you are reliant on all the other pieces sort of coming together. And, sort of thinking about the film with Astronaut, 50 odd years ago, JFK said, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I guess, especially with a first feature film, that must have been quite a daunting prospect. What was it about this particular story that made you want to make it your first feature?
Well, it wouldn't leave me alone. The story wouldn't leave me alone. I'm speed through this, but my mum died in a nursing home, and there was an old guy in the garden who was in a wheelchair, and he was always staring up at the sky. And I one day went and sat next to him and said, "What is it that you're looking for?" And he said, "Another go." And that was the trigger for this story. But it is hard, because then you have to drill down and find, well, I know who this man is, but what's the story about? And I think that the story that kept coming back to me, I mean, I write a lot from my heart and my personal experiences, because, you know, I'm new at writing. I've only been writing for 10 years. And I think real writers write for 50. And then you can call yourself a writer, right? But I think the old people I was looking at my mum's nursing home were lonely. And they were surrounded by people, but they were lonely. And I wanted Angus to have some friends. I wanted him to make friends. And I think that became the core of the story. And it was blood. Can I swear?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not the one show.
Imagine pitching this. Rich doesn't even know any of this, but pitching this story for 6.5 years. You know, I trot around the world, and I'm a middle-aged TV actress trying to make my first feature film about an old man or an elderly man who goes to space. And they would just literally go, oh, no. There was a rocket. Oh, no, goodbye, thank you. So it really was an uphill battle. And the trouble is, the more I saw how the elderly were being marginalised, especially in cinema, and I just think, bloody hell, look at Marigold Hotel. Look at, you know, great movies are coming out. There's a massive, great audience for this. Packed.
Absolutely. I used to work in the cinema, and I think we dubbed it the Grey Pound.
Yeah, the Grey Pound.
It was basically because there was an audience that had been forgotten, but now people are finally waking up
family,
to it.
You know, this isn't right. It's a family film, not, but a drama about this story unites family. You go home, you talk about it. You go, well, I like and I think that's important too. But if it was, I mean, every filmmaker says it's hard to make a movie. Richard's made 1 million brilliant movies. But honestly, it was kind of tough, this one. Yeah, we got a lot of doors slammed in our faces. And you also get that thing at the budget as well. So you go to Cannes, oh God, it's dreadful, I'm never going again. But you go and you say, I need some money, please. And then you tell them the movie and they say, well, this is a 10, 20, $30 million movie. And we would like Steven Spielberg to direct this, and Richard Dreyfuss to star in it, and who are you? So we would then have to kind of pitch as hard as we could, and then finally suddenly telefilm came in. That was the amazing thing. Dan Lyon was brilliant in telefilm, and then he saw the story and he loved the story and he believed in it, and he was the trigger for everything. And then Richard, thank God, said yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic film. I have to say, Richard, that I don't cry at movies, but this film, there was a lot of dust in the cinema, and I watched it because, sorry to skip to the end, but I mean, the podcast won't go out until after the movie's out, but I want to talk about the ending because, like you say, it's about uniting families, and, Angus's dream ends up, I mean, when I watched it, I could compare it to the films like The Wrestler and Black Swan, which have these people achieving their dreams, but potentially at the ultimate cost. But what it does is it actually seems to unite his family behind him. Initially, they're very reticent behind him going, but then it sort of brings them together. I mean, how were you able to sort of build up that relationship with the family to have that pure sort of cathartic moment at the end?
Sometimes it's appropriate. Well, there's a line in the Zoo Story by Edward Albee, and he says, sometimes it's necessary to go a long distance out of your way in order to come back a short distance correctly. And it's sometimes the only appropriate thing to do is to announce and commit to the hunt, to getting that thing accomplished and done, no matter how silly it may sound. And something happened because of World War II. I mean, we've never talked about this, but people started dying in public hospitals as opposed to family. And that was a very, very different kettle of fish than had been for 200 years. In America, people died in their homes until the war. And then all hell broke loose because Grandma died because there was no one home, and she was taken to a hospital, and her children were all over the world fighting or working on this war. And so the nuclear family kind of went like that. And at the same time, it's right to be selfish and to take your exit and make it work. Make your moment as selfish as possible. That you know why you're doing this. And ultimately, it doesn't matter whether everyone else in the family does or doesn't understand. You do it. And there are lots of stories about Albert Einstein misunderstanding what his father was actually trying to say when he threw his whole family out of the room when he was dying. He said, get out, because it was important, it was more important for him to confront his fears of this passage than it was to be a member of a loving family. And that, it almost killed Albert. And he then rewrote his entire relationship with his father. He was distant and he was cold and he was this. He wasn't any such thing. He was just, the only way that Albert could interpret what he was doing was by saying, I come first and I need this. So in Angus's, it takes him so long to fill out the form, you know. It's one of the things that I would argue with Sheila. Even now, I would say it's too long, because Angus is a gentle man who does not like confrontation, but if not this time, then when?
Yeah. Got it, yeah. Seize the day, right?
Seize it, yeah. And the feeling that he must have had, well, you see it, you know, when he's sitting in the ship next to, what's his name?
Colm.
You see this delight that he's made it. And it doesn't matter whether he's dead in 1 second or 10. It doesn't matter. What matters is he's had this secret dream for so long, and he's fulfilled it.
Absolutely. I've got time for one. Okay. No, that's okay. But I just want to say, I mean, I saw parallels quickly with it, you know, with Roy Neary's sort of Close Encounters, where his dream ultimately cost him his family, and it was just so nice to see, you know, after all this time, you know, you sort of having another chance and basically reconnecting with the family at the end. I thought it was such a beautiful moment, and, you know, thank you for that, because it really actually touched me, actually, yeah.
Oh, good, I'm really
I wish I could have had longer, but I'm sure we could have talked for hours, but I know that you've got a world premiere to prepare for. So.
Yeah, no.
We should auction ourselves off.
Really? I don't think I get very much money though, you would.
No. Let's do it together, and we'll offer all of the journalists a dinner. And it'll cost whatever the auction brings.
Or you could do a lottery,
Actually, that's a really
online
good
lottery.
idea. And then donate it to a charity.
Yeah.
That's a very good idea. We'll have dinner with you.
Yeah, oh, thank you.
And I'll tell you
Because
right
I pictured the
now,
idea. I'll take it.
I'm getting involved with the Orlando Film Festival because no one realizes the closer you are to the film business, you don't know dick about it. And the people who are hip to the idea of asking the questions that nobody ever asks, that nobody has the courage to ask. You've asked 3 or 4 of them already. And I say, keep it up. And then actors will say, you gotta meet this guy because he knows the questions to ask. And that's a big deal.
So Danny Boyle and Edinburgh go hand in hand after Trainspotting, and he spoke with me on the red carpet about his new film Yesterday, which imagines a world without the Beatles, about the making of this movie and what attracts him to projects involving big British icons.
Well, no, what happens is with a film like this, you have to, obviously that's so dependent on the music, you have to get permission before you really even write the script. Because there's no point wasting time if you're not going to be able to make the film, and you can't make the film without the music. So obviously what Working Title, or the producers of the film, did is that they mentioned to Apple and Sony, who control the financial side of the songs. They own the songs, but Apple have control of the aesthetic rights, which is obviously Paul and Ringo and Olivia and Yoko, the widows of George and John. And they approved of the idea going ahead. So obviously Richard Curtis wrote the script, and then we began to make the film. And when we finished it, we sent it to them because it's not their film, and we wouldn't want it to be, and they don't want it to be. But they have approved the use of the music. But so out of courtesy, we sent them the finished film. And we got a lovely message back from Ringo and Barbara and his wife and Olivia, George's widow. Very beautiful messages back. So that was very pleasing, really, in a way. And it's not the Beatles story. It's not like a biopic. It is obviously an idea that the Beatles have been erased from history, which is a very funny thing, given that they're probably the most famous group in the world. So it's a very funny prospect that they might have been erased. And then this one guy tries to kind of use their songs to build his career out of it. Paul, we don't think, has seen it. He saw the trailer and he liked the trailer. It was very funny about the trailer. He said, I didn't think it would work, but it clearly does. And then he said, and then we asked his permission to use Yesterday as a title. And he said, he told this very funny story. He said that it was originally called Scrambled Eggs, the song, because he's literally had the song, the tune, had kind of formed in his head in a dream. And he came downstairs and he just sang some lyrics about what was on the breakfast table to illustrate it. And he thought, ironically, given the nature of our film, about this guy borrowing or stealing the songs, he thought he'd stolen that song unwittingly. He thought it already existed and he copied it. So he used to play it to people with these lyrics. Anyway, he hadn't copied it. It's a completely original piece of genius. Anyway, but he also said, listen, if the film's a mess, you could maybe Scrambled Eggs would be a better title than Yesterday. And we said, no, please, let's use Yesterday. So, and he was fine. He was very funny. They got a great sense of humour.
You seem to be attracted to big British icons, whether it's people like the Beatles, even the Olympic Games. What is it in you that takes on these sort of big pressure projects? And now you can add the Beatles into that kind of list as well.
Yeah, I don't know. You kind of like, it mixes it. Sometimes you kind of like, sometimes, I mean, and this one is a mixture because it's a very ordinary guy. I mean, the two main characters in it, Jack and Ellie, they're kind of like quite ordinary, very lovely, decent people from Suffolk. And obviously the Beatles is very, very famous, world famous. But it's always that mixture, really, of ordinary people. And that was a very important quality in it because when they started, they were very ordinary lads. You know, there's nothing particularly special about them, really, other than what they provided for the world by working together and, you know, their genius when they came together as musicians. So, it's a mixture, really. And the Olympics involved a very famous ceremony and lots of very famous people. But actually, its real root was the volunteers, who were just ordinary citizens of this country, you know. who volunteered their time, and they're the real heart of that ceremony. So you try and mix it up, I think, rather than get stars in your eyes. You know?
Perfect, thank you. Next up is Sasha Collington, the writer-director of the quirky and delightful Love Type D, which finds a woman who has been dumped 11 times in a row and discovers to her dismay that she has a loser in love gene. Thank you for joining me, Sasha. Can you tell me how sort of the film came around? Sort of, you're the writer-director of this film. What was the genesis of this story for you?
So originally it started as a short film. So I had a short which was about a young boy that's sent to dump his brother's girlfriend, and so I met I went to some film festivals, and I met an investor there who wanted to invest in a feature version, but he wanted those characters to be in it, and so from there I developed the idea of Love Type D. So I was thinking, and I started thinking about like the concept of the idea of a loser in love gene, because I'm very interested in science, and I'd read about epigenetics and the way in which your behaviour within your own lifetime can affect your gene expression. Obviously I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me on the definition.
Before I saw the film yesterday, I actually read an interview with Ari Aster, who's sort of just released in Midsummer, and he was talking about how sort of breakups have helped fuel his writing. And I was sitting there thinking, watching that film, I was like, I wonder if the writer of this, what category she maybe puts herself under, and what category do I consider myself under? Was any sort of kind of breakup an inspiration for this story, or were you the one going, I'm always the one getting rid of guys or girls or anything like that?
I don't think it was inspired by a specific breakup or anything, but I think it is inspired by that feeling that sometimes you have, when you're like feeling, maybe, I'm destined to fail. And I think that can be in a life sense also beyond relationships, while others will succeed. And I think it's quite just a common feeling, you're, like middle of the night, you wake up and you feel, oh my God, maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe I'm going to fail in these things. And I think it's from that feeling rather than a particular, documentary style reliving of my life in film.
You touched on it with science being an involvement, and I think that was a really clever twist on sort of these romantic kind of comedies. Is that something that you have this passion about science, and did you see that thinking going, what if we can kind of fuse the two here together?
Yeah, I'm very interested in science, and particularly like science in comedy, because you feel like there are so many, we're in this like, there's so many kind of interesting developments going on in science, and I feel that, I did actually talked to some geneticists when I was writing Love Type D, and I did put some science in, but then there's a sort of there's about a maximum level of science that the audience want. So we put more in, and we did test screenings. It's like too much science, let's take some out. But yeah, I think it's just very interesting, the whole idea of like nature nurture, and to what degree is your kind of behaviour predestined. From your birth, are you meant to like behave in a certain way, and are you going to get divorced? Is it pre-written from the moment you're born, or is it to what degree you master of your own destiny? And I think that's the theme really of the film.
One thing I really liked about the film as well is the relationship between Maeve and Wilbur, the young boy. And usually in these films it's always the best pal that they always confide in, but it's this young boy that she's constantly going back and forth to. Was that something that was always, you were mentioning it in the short, when it was kind of coming to the film, did you ever think, this is going to separate it from sort of these usual kind of romantic comedies, it's the best friend? And what was it like writing that relationship? Because they seem to have such a great chemistry together, the two of them.
Yeah, well, I definitely really love Wilbur's character. He's very, very fun to write, because I feel that because he hasn't yet fallen in love, he's 12, he's got this whole world of experience that he doesn't know yet. And I think then he has like a certain pragmatism of seeing the world with this lucidity that like adults don't necessarily have. And so that's why I found him interesting. And I suppose I wanted to subvert some sort of aspects of the genre, because there is always a best friend, but I like the idea that what if it's like the 12-year-old brother of the man that dumped you, who ends up playing that confidant role.
What was it like for the casting? Because obviously Maeve has gone on to become quite a big TV star and so on, and the film's been developed for a little while. What was it like for you casting? Because you've got a real eye for it based on this film.
Oh, thanks. Well, actually finding the lead role for this was a complete nightmare. We auditioned so many people, and we're probably like a few weeks from the principal photography, and we hadn't cast the role. And so I remembered that I saw Maeve in a film that was at Berlin called Griff the Invisible, an Australian indie feature. And so I contacted her agent in the middle of the night, and because I just had this feeling like I think it should be her, you know. And she's about to. She's in a Carnival Row, which is a new Amazon series, which will be coming out in August. So, you know, since she's done Love Type D, she's been doing also some other sort of TV series also.
Do you think things like that, when it kind of kicks off, when people like that become known names and they start seeking out their back catalogue and filmography, do you think almost the time's right for this film where it's like, oh, I want to see more of this actress, oh, and here's a feature film that's now available for people to find? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think she is, for me, I find her just so interesting to watch. She's just a very interesting person on screen, and I think she's got a really good balance of being funny but also being completely believable. I really believe her in every moment.
Yeah, and the buzz has been kind of building for the film for a while. I know that you had a hugely successful kind of Kickstarter campaign as well.
Thanks.
Obviously the film has been in development for a while. What's been sort of the positives and the challenges of something like that, where you've had this film and it's been worked on for a little while? Has it been one of those ones you want to sort of just get out to the world, or it's thinking like, I've been blessed with this extra time to keep adding to it or refining it?
It definitely has taken a while to make. I think it's taken like 5 years, and I think during that process there are definitely many days when you feel, oh my god, why am I doing this? You know, because it's just such hard work. But I think it takes a while, when especially because I raised the finance, so you know, I did that alongside writing and directing the film and things like that. It just means it takes a bit longer. So you know, I kind of would have liked it to be done in less time. But I think either you have time or you have money. And if you're a smaller budget film, I think you always need a bit more time.
Yeah. And what's going to be sort of the next journey for the film? Because obviously it's going to be getting its UK premiere here at the festival. Where's it kind of going to go to next and sort of its journey out into the world? So we literally finished it like a couple days congratulations.
ago. So we're really at the start of the journey. Yeah, so we're I'm not sure yet where we'll go after this, but yeah, we squeaked in with our DCP, I think, 2 days before the screening. Yeah.
And what did you learn about yourself sort of through the process? Because it has been a little while of sort of developing the film. What's sort of changed for you from the start to the end? What have you discovered about yourself through this kind of process?
I think what's interesting is that you sort of forget in the middle like why you wanted to make the film. And I think at the beginning you have a very precise idea, and in the middle, you, at least for me, I lost it. You know, I couldn't remember anymore. And then I think through the process you remember that, and then there's also the further experience that you have, because obviously 5 years, you know, you are a slightly different person by the end than you are at the beginning. And so that's what I think is like a blessing and a curse of having an idea 5 years ago, is that 5 years later, you know, you can also add something to it. So I think, you know, along the way, because we did do some extra shoots and stuff, and even just with adding in graphics and things, you know, and VFX, as you evolve as a filmmaker, you can also enhance certain aspects of the film.
And how do you think audiences are going to connect with it? Because I know for myself, as I say, I was watching going, oh, who am I in this sort of, how would I fit, how would I react in this kind of world? What do you think audiences are going to think when the film now kind of goes out there to audiences and crowds?
Well, I hope that, you know, people do kind of think about like where they fit within the spectrum of love, because obviously within the world of the film it's quite polarised. You're either a dumper and you end all your relationships, or you're a dumpy and you always get dumped, and obviously nothing's ever quite so simple as that. But I think it is interesting to just think about one's behaviour in love, and like, you know, are you eternally going out with the same person just with a different hairdo, or like are you know, always kind of essentially making the same mistakes in relationships and blaming the other person? And so I suppose the film, you know, obviously we want to make people laugh, and I think with a comedy you just want to, you know, you want people to feel that they've had a good time. But I guess I would also like people, I suppose, to think about the thematics within it, about, you know, behaviour and like, you know, is it the universe that's sabotaging you, or is it your own behaviour? Are you sabotaging you?
And what are you going to kind of do next? Obviously with this film, it's going to be going out, and I'm sure there'll be commitments with that. What are you hoping to do sort of next? Is it something you're hoping will be a quicker process, or is it something that you're wanting to dive into as much as this?
So I'm developing a couple of ideas for like episodic. So yeah, a couple like still using science, so different scientific ideas, and still within the comedy genre, because I really enjoy being in comedy. And I'm also starting an executive MBA. Awesome. So yeah, so learning how to like also build and grow, you know, film and television production companies.
Is that something that obviously with Edinburgh that there's going to, I think most of the films are here, it's like 42% directed by women. Do you feel that sort of that's something that a lot of female talent needs to do, is to go out and go, well, I have to go create my own talent because it can be so frustrating to get the opportunities, or is this something that is more of a passion for you to go and kind of create your own project?
I think for me it's that I mean, because when I started out, I'd never raised finance before. I was from an entirely creative background. I think I just found that I enjoyed it as well as, you know, it's not that I would want to do only that, but I really found I enjoyed it, and I, you know, so I felt like, oh, this is something I want to pursue as well as, and like, you know, I really like genre, you know, really like comedy, thriller, sci-fi, and so I feel like I would really like to build something that focuses on genre, because I think within the UK we're known a lot for drama within indie features, and like, you know, I think there's also room for more perhaps genre pieces.
You've got me excited. I'm a sci-fi fan as well. I'd love to see something like that from you in the future and stuff. But thank you very much for joining me. I wish you all the best of luck with your film and going out there to the audiences. So thank you very much.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
The Captor is a darkly comic crime drama about the absurd but true story in 1970s Sweden, where a hostage situation that became famous for inspiring the Stockholm Syndrome. The film is out now on limited cinema release and available on streaming. I chatted to writer-director Robert Budreau about the film, working with actor Ethan Hawke, Born to be Blue, and many other topics. Enjoy. I have to thank you for this film, actually, because I, in my lack of knowledge, have always had the Stockholm Syndrome. It's been a phrase that a lot of people know and are aware of, but for me it's always been through movies such as sort of Dog Day Afternoon. It was referenced in Die Hard and stuff like that, and I'd always kind of assumed it was maybe like a Swedish sort of psychologist or something had actually created the phrase. I didn't actually realise it was based on this, as you put it in the film, this absurd but true story. When did you first become aware of the true story, and what drew you to the project?
In the summer of 2016, a producer, Scott Eversano, had brought me this article from the New Yorker called The Bank Drama by Daniel Lang, and it was an article written in 1975. He had gone to Stockholm, Daniel, to interview everybody after the court case and look at the court transcripts, and he wrote this amazing New Yorker article. So that's when I had been aware. That's when I became aware of it.
Okay, and was it something immediately that you thought would translate into a good film?
Well, I knew it was a very captivating story with really interesting characters. The absurdity and the tone of it attracted me, but also kind of scared me because you know, it's not quite what I expected to be behind the Stockholm Syndrome, to be honest. Like, I had heard of the Patty Hearst case in '74 in America, and so that was my challenge, was to decide what approach to take and how much of the absurdity, and I tried to embrace the absurdity as much as I could. But that kind of began the journey. But it's always, you know, I had just worked with Ethan Hawke on a movie called Born to be Blue, and we had been looking to try to work together, and I saw this character and I thought that could be fun for Ethan, and that was part of the reason I jumped on and I brought him on board.
Yeah, because I mean, Ethan Hawke is one of my favourite actors, and it's like, even the things like Sinister or whatever, which could be, you know, determined sort of schlocky horror, he seems to bring a real sort of humanity and gravity to a role like that, and it's nice to see him sort of kick loose with the more absurd bits, but in the quieter moments that really sort of shines through. And what was it about Ethan that you knew that this character would be perfect for him, to be able to, because it's a character where he does bad things, but clearly there is a charisma and an appeal to him that, you know, for the hostages to basically sort of be captivated by him, I guess, in more senses than one, if you pardon the pun that I've just done there. So,
yeah.
What was it?
Well, Ethan has always been a very naturally empathetic, sympathetic kind of actor, even in a lot of movies where he's played flawed characters, he's still kind of lovable, and that's just kind of part of Ethan. And it was something that was really important for this, because if you get turned off of this character and don't like him, then it doesn't work, obviously. And Ethan also doesn't get a chance to do that much comedy. He tends to get offered a lot of dramatic stuff, and so I think he reveled in the comedic aspect of it and actually brought even more of the comedy. Like, you know, you're never really sure with an actor whether he'll dial up the comedy or dial down the comedy, but Ethan actually really leaned into it and embraced that aspect of it.
Yeah, when it came to the shoot, I'm interested, was there any sort of rehearsal period, or did you like shoot the film chronologically? I'm just wondering if you tried to sort of almost recreate the Stockholm Syndrome with the actors, where, you know, they experienced it as they would, and then you would build that relationship between the actors and the characters as you went through the film.
Yeah, fortunately, because there's only a few locations, we were able to shoot pretty much chronological order, which had a lot of advantages, because, you know, you can feel more free to improvise and try stuff, because then you know you can change it, whereas if it's all over the map, you have to be really careful. But it also meant that the biggest scenes, like when Ethan breaks into the bank, we shot that on day one, like almost the first take, and that's like the biggest, craziest stuff. And that was the challenge to do, like, at the very start. But what was your other question?
It was just if you were trying to sort of recreate that Stockholm Syndrome by having the actors.
Oh yeah. Well, that was very useful for Numi, because Ethan was playing this larger character. She never knew what he was going to do. He kept everybody like on their edge, like, what's Ethan going to do next? And that was great, because it allowed her to act in the moment, and allowed her to, over the course of the shoot, to slowly kind of have that syndrome. And then we move into the vault, and we're like a whole week shooting in this tiny space, and so I think it was very useful in that sense, more so for probably her than it even was for Ethan.
Okay, so I'm assuming the interior of the bank was that sort of on set sort of thing. Did you sort of purposely make that the vault in particular was quite tight in terms of filming? Did you like move walls up, or did you have them basically confined in this space in order to sort of increase that sense of lack of escape?
We had found this 70s warehouse that we used for a lot of things, and within that we built that vault. And so we had some walls that moved, but for the most part, you know, in reality, it was bigger than the vault that they were actually in. The actual vault they were in was super tiny and super unappealing. You know, for a film, you have to make it at least a little bit more visually interesting, especially if you're going to spend most of your entire movie in there. And so that there was quite a bit of work with my director of photography, Brendan Stacey, and my production designer, Aidan LaRue, just finding that right balance, because we didn't want it to feel too nice and stylized, but we didn't want it to feel too shitty, because you got to be there for like an hour. And overall, I wanted the film to have a certain kind of gloss and a certain precision to it, kind of because that was the Swedish kind of culture in the 70s, in the Swedish way, and so it was just finding that balance.
Yeah, no, I mean, the cinematography is excellent, because it really does sort of feel of the time and the place. It's a great sort of period. In terms of negotiations, you know, Lars Niceman has to go through a lot of negotiations. Just wondering, did you have to go through a lot of negotiations to get the Dylan track, or was that actually turned out to be quite easy? Or
well, the Dylan tracks, I did get a lot of Dylan tracks, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. I developed a past relationship with the Bob Dylan camp, and so I was able to go back to them on this. I tried to do something with them in the past, and it didn't work out, and so because I had the relationship, it made it easier to go to them, and they were very generous with us. So it didn't cost us a fortune, and it was all very period appropriate, and obviously, like, he was a fan of Dylan, so it was used in a positive way. I'm a huge Dylan fan. He's kind of like my biggest kind of artistic guiding light, so I was pushing to use a lot of that, and excited that we were able to do it.
Just wondering, you know, the Stockholm Syndrome started sort of in the 70s, and sort of back then there was sort of press were outside, and you'd have occasional sort of phone things. Just wondering, you know, do you see how that sort of situation would have changed sort of nowadays with the use of the media and social media, how we sort of cover sort of crimes and our relationships to criminals, because there's a lot more documentaries about them, certainly films made about them, so that can colour sort of the public's perception of them. I'm just sort of thinking of something like Making of a Murderer, where you had Stephen Avery case where people watch this documentary and are then sort of sending in petitions that he should be released based on sort of one side of the story. I mean, how do you feel about sort of that? And is there a sort of responsibility for people to sort of try and dig into the facts a bit more, or do we need to sort of, do you think we need to, are these sort of films a jumping off point for learning more about these sort of criminal views?
Well, I think they can. They certainly can be. I mean, this incident, there was a Swedish documentary made and even a Swedish TV movie made about it. It was a super important cultural event for Swedes. And at that time, it was the first major kind of televised hostage crisis that had ever happened. And people were calling in, giving the cops all kind of bizarre suggestions for how to deal with it. So in a very early 70s way, people were still doing that, but it was through radio and telephones instead of social media. But it is one of the great things about movies based on real things is it provides a jumping off point for people to go, like, people walk out of the theater and they're already on Wikipedia checking out the event. But the other thing that people have to be careful about is this idea of, like, what's the truth and what exactly happened, and it's always the biggest question a filmmaker gets. And I did a Chet Baker movie, and then now I did another real life story. It's like, what everyone always wants to know exactly what happened. Did you change anything? Why did you change it? And the reality is, in order to tell a big story in 90 minutes, you have to obviously compress and simplify things. And the question becomes, how much of that do you do, and why do you do it? And it's one of the challenges. And on this, it was so absurd. Rather than kind of hide that and make it just like a gritty, serious, dramatic film, which kind of, I think people expect it kind of to be because it's about the Stockholm Syndrome, but it really wasn't. It was really quite absurd, and all of the crazy things that happen in the film are from the article.
Yeah, I've been reading the article after I watched the film. I dug into that, and it's actually great to see sort of long-form journalism at that time.
It's so nice
because you just scroll and it keeps going and going. I'm like, this is incredible that someone managed to. You still, back then would be able to. I mean, these days it'd be like maybe a short 1,000-word article and then subjected to ads in between as you're scrolling down. But this is the whole thing. I mean, was there anything included in the story that you felt was too absurd to potentially go in when you're reading it? You go, I can't believe this. The audience wouldn't believe it, or was it just basically?
Well, I mean, there's a few things that we didn't try to do, like even. Like when they first break into the bank, he tried to make him sing Elvis Presley's "Lonesome Cowboy," which actually was very absurd. I looked into the rights on that, and that was a whole different issue too. But that's actually more absurd than using Dylan. The other thing that the bank robber actually wore this like dark face paint, like kind of almost like he was Middle Eastern, but then he had this mock American accent and these clown glasses. Like he actually looked even goofier than Ethan looked, and he looked pretty goofy. And so it was finding you don't want your star to look ridiculous in face paint for the whole film, but instead of doing that, Ethan really pushed hard for this leather Easy Rider outfit, which in real life the guy had more like traditional clothes on. So that was kind of our way of playing up to that ridiculous kind of outfit. But for the most part, I kind of tried to keep the tone similar in terms of like dealing with the Prime Minister and the police ineptitude. And it's just so hard to imagine a time where there wasn't a task force, and some people watch it and say, well, the police would have had all this and this and that. It's like, no, they didn't. Of course they didn't. Even in the US in the late 60s and 70s, it wasn't the same, especially in Sweden. I mean, most Americans can't even believe that cops in the UK mostly don't have guns, that it's like batons. Like that just, they think that they can't even wrap their minds around that. But it's Europe.
Yeah. Did you try to get in contact with anyone that was sort of still alive who was involved in the incident to get their side of the story, or did you basically mostly use the New Yorker article as your jumping off point?
Yeah, I didn't, because the New Yorker article was then led me to all of the research that he had done. So I went to Stockholm multiple times, and I had like court transcripts, documentaries, like each of those hostages and police gave extensive transcripts in '74 when it happened about exactly what happened, how they felt, what they felt, and then over time there's been 2 or 3 documentaries, and it's funny because over time people become less reliable. Like 40 years later. Yeah. What they remember is different than what they said in 1974 right after the incident. And so I didn't feel, and because I had to composite some characters and stuff, I didn't feel in this case I needed to. If there wasn't all that information, I probably would have, but in this case I didn't need to.
Do you have any sort of personal sort of favourite sort of crime movies and heist movies that you maybe drew elements on or just enjoy watching?
Well, I mean, with this movie, it was hard not to just really look at Dog Day Afternoon because it is one of my favorite movies, and it happens to be in 1973 and be quite similar. I mean, in a lot of ways, Ethan and I talked quite a bit at the start about like how is this different enough that it's worth making? Because Dog Day Afternoon is such a high bar, you're never going to achieve that, but you want to like make something that's clearly different, and then hope that people just don't inevitably compare it, but they do because it's just the same time and the same incident, and so there's no getting around that. I think Dog Day Afternoon was certainly the one that we talked about the most, for better or worse.
Yeah, because I mean it's an odd thing because essentially you're telling the original story of the Stockholm Syndrome. It's like, I remember watching, there was like an old Humphrey Bogart movie, and it was like they had this scene where it was a bookseller, a female bookseller, and it's like he's talking to her, she's not all that attractive, and then she takes off her glasses and whips down her hair, and suddenly he thinks she's amazing, and it's like, I was thinking that is so cliched, but then it's like that was probably the first time that happened. It's just weird just seeing that now, and it's how do you. So it must have been one of the things on your mind about how do you create, like you say, something new from when you're telling the original story, but people have seen echoes of it. I mean, I typed in Stockholm Syndrome in film, and it was like 22 films of basically people using the trope of woman falls in love with her captor sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's come sort of shorthand for
times,
that.
Yeah.
But I think by the take that you've done it's put a sort of fresh and unique spin on one that it's yes there will be comparisons to Dog Day Afternoon, but I think it stands alone as a separate film.
Well, one of the ironically, I became less interested about trying to dig deep into the psychology of the Stockholm Syndrome. I was more just interested in like the absurdity of the event, and they're obviously tied together. But when you read that article and you look at it, it's people expect like you can't imagine over one night that those women would fall for those guys, but that's what happens. And to show that in a movie over one night in one location is very difficult. Like, the other version of this is just like a very, very slow, detailed drama, character drama, like even more like a play. But then it's less fun, less moving. It's less of a heist film. That's the other approach that I decided not to take. But it's one of the challenges of making these movies. It's fun.
I had to skip to the end of the article because it was one just before this, and it was the transcripts with Olsson, and he was saying that he was surprised that it lasted so long. I think the original Stockholm, it was about 5 or 6 days it lasted in the end, and he said he was like saying that if the hostages hadn't actually fallen for him as they did, it should have ended a lot sooner. It's just that they kept wanting, because they were so enamored of him, or they wanted him to survive and for them to both survive. Whereas if they just fought him or done something along the way, the whole thing could have come crashing down a lot earlier. And it was fascinating to read that sort of bit at the end where he was like, if they just fought back a bit more, I might have ended up killing him. And he said that he would have potentially actually killed him, because it's that back and forth of whether or not he can do it, because he clearly cares enough that he doesn't want to do it, but you could tell that he would be pushed to that point if he wanted.
Well, that's the thing, it's kind of a two-way street. Like, they have to be nice to him, and he has to kind of fall for them in a way, and it's obviously quite complicated how it all wants to kind of come together.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that wonderful scene where Ninian Pace is sort of telling her husband about the recipe for the fish and stuff like that, and I think that's when you sort of start to care for her character, and that's probably when Ethan Hawke sort of sees something in her as well. I mean, a lot of all your sort of short films and your feature films, I noticed that you've kind of written, produced, and directed. Is that something that's important to you to find your own stories, or has there ever been? Would you ever be tempted to work on someone else's screenplay, or is it important to have that kind of control on the projects that you work for?
I mean, I've done that in the past, kind of out of necessity, but I'm certainly, like, now I have a few scripts that I'm developing that I wrote, but I'm also attached to direct several that I haven't written. So I'm more than happy not to have to write everything, because it's fun writing, but it's a long, painful process. And then the producing side, again, I don't need to be a producer. It's just I often find you're often your own driving force. Like, if you're the creative engine and I am able to produce and I understand that world, it helps me get the projects over the finish line if I'm on a team. But to me, it's all about a team. Like, I never just produce on my own. On different projects, I team up with different producers. And film, like more than most arts, I think is very, very collaborative. Obviously, in terms of the producing team, in terms of your creative team, in terms of your cast. So as a director, I often just feel like I'm just trying to like manage and find the best people to make me look as good as I can, and hopefully I don't make them look bad. You know.
You mentioned sort of Born to Be Blue. I saw that film a few years ago. I wasn't, again, all that familiar with Chet Baker's story, but I was just sort of drawn into that world by the film, and Ethan Hawke's performance again was just my word. What was it about Chet Baker's story that you were drawn to again? Was he someone whose music that you listened to in particular, or was it just the sort of the backstory of his life off stage that was the appeal?
It's kind of a combo. Like, I've always loved jazz and old jazz. Like, the very first short film I ever did was a period jazz film. And then I just got sucked into his kind of story, this idea of this flawed white man kind of working effectively in a kind of in a black man's art form, and kind of what was happening in America in the 50s and 60s with race, and also just this idea of so many films have dealt with kind of artists using drugs and their ups and downs. But I wanted to do something that was a little bit different, where it was very much like showing the artistic choice between drugs and love and the complications of what happens, and being truthful about that. Like, Chet Baker doesn't like get clean and choose love and walk into the sunset. He kind of does the opposite. But he still creates great music by doing that. Drugs aren't necessarily like definitively bad in that sense. And so Ethan and I on that film talked a lot about just making sure it was kind of a universal story. Like, it happened to be Chet Baker, but if you take his name off of that, does it still mean something? And then I love the tone of jazz and that dreamy kind of world. It's just very romantic and alluring, and so there's a lot of reasons that project drew me in.
Sort of the ending of the film, where he's sort of in the dressing room, sort of making the decision or whatever, sort of reminded me, sort of parallels almost of like The Wrestler and Black Swan, where you've got this pivotal moment where it's like they can continue pursuing their dream and their goal, but knowing that choice will potentially sort of destroy them at the same time. And it's just, I guess it was also sort of exploding sort of Whiplash as well, where you've just got this all-consuming sort of passion for something. You're really good at it, but it's the cost of what it will do to you in order to succeed.
Well, yeah, and in real life, usually choices are difficult, and it's not, you can't always just have it all. Of course, everyone would like to have it all, but it's more of a test of character when you're really forced to choose between one thing you want and another thing you want, but which do you want more and why? And that's what was fascinating about his story. And it's also just the way you tell it and how you frame it, because a lot of other stories, even if you look at some of the famous studio biopics like Walk the Line or Ray, those guys all continued to have difficulty with drugs and alcohol often, but they chose to often frame the story where it's like at the end they find love and the drugs kind of go away and then the story ends. Whereas Chet Baker was more infamous for his drug use, and so I found like that kind of a Hollywood ending would not ring true on Born to Be Blue, and it would feel kind of contrived, and so I didn't want to go there.
What I particularly liked about Born to Be Blue, I think, is because it didn't follow that sort of Hollywood studio biopic, sort of meet them at a young age and then find out that they find their skill for music and then have like particular, the sort of things like Jersey Boys, where it's like someone says something on the TV and he goes, "Oh, that'll make a good song." Bohemian Rhapsody and that sort of thing, where they do that. I like that you sort of focus on like the one particular sort of point in his life to tell. You could tell where he'd come from and where he was going to go, but just by focusing on that one particular point, I think it elevated that particular film and story.
Yeah, I just find that old-fashioned traditional biopic thing format is just kind of boring and more for TV now. I think the only time you can get away with it almost is if you do a big studio version where it's you have enough money and you can afford to be big and broad, and you can afford even not necessarily to always have great reviews. It doesn't matter. You can still do really well. Like something like Bohemian Rhapsody is a great example of a film where it does have great performances and it's very enjoyable. But it's almost a study in how you can make a very daring story as broad and bland and kind of generic as possible, but successfully. Like, it's actually difficult to do that. So I was quite impressed by that. I didn't necessarily like the film, but you can do that with the studio. And I'm really anxious to see Rocket Man. I'm sure that's different, but that's another traditional studio biopic film. That looks fun, and I'm excited to see that. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I want to see that. A lot more. It sounds a bit more clever than
it certainly goes more along the fantastic. It does proper like musical numbers with the songs and stuff like that, and certainly doesn't shy away from the darker demons of Elton's life, whereas Bohemian Rhapsody maybe kind of glossed over some of them slightly. So, I mean, what's next for you with the film? Is it sort of touring around a few more festivals, and what have you got sort of lined up next?
Well, we're kind of at the end of the run on this film. We were released in North America like a couple of months ago, and then we're launching in the UK today, in some cinemas and on digital download, all that fun stuff. And so I'm, heading back, and I've got a couple films that are hopefully close to shooting. There's such tricky things to all bring together. So I'm hopefully shooting something this fall, early next year, and then I'm developing a few TV shows, looking to dip my toe in the TV world like everybody else.
You mentioned streaming there. I guess it's the topic that everyone sort of likes to talk about at the moment. What are your particular views on the sort of Netflix model, and do you think it's a good thing, or do you still prefer that sort of communal sort of viewing in a cinema where you can have complete strangers but they're all coming together through a joint thing to watch?
I certainly prefer that, because the traditional model is you get both. You have a window where people see it in the cinema, then you have a window where people see that. So that's always going to be better in my mind. But that being said, there are some movies in this day and age where you can't get certain audiences to the cinema, and it's a waste of time and energy to try to just have a terrible theatrical. It's better to go hard early and get, to me, it's ultimately about having people watch your film. So I embrace that for the right kind of movie is going straight to day and date or whatever. That's fine. I do think the theatrical experience can help promote your movies. I see a lot of movies now, because Netflix does so many films now that you can get buried on Netflix. I know some big movies that have only got 10 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. This is a $50 million movie. It's well, no one's heard of that, no one's reviewed it. You might see it on Netflix at the bottom of your thing, but you can get buried. That's the thing that worries me a bit. But at the same time, they've got money, and they support independent films in a different way. So, like everything, I think it's a mix. It's a mixed blessing, but it's exciting. It certainly stirs things up, and it's the way TV is so good now. We have to, feature filmmakers have to compete with good TV, and there's no way around that. So, or ideally, do TV and film.
Yeah, it does seem to be a sort of, we're entering a sort of golden age, I think, of TV. Yeah. Sort of people say it was Breaking Bad that started it. There was probably a few other things before that. Yeah. But what sort of TV are you enjoying at the moment?
It's that kind of stuff. I tend to get drawn to the premium kind of crime drama things. I tend to like the limited series, the slightly more cinematic, theatrical feeling limited series, like the Fargos of the world. And, that's obviously came from a feature, but I'm drawn mostly to that stuff. I haven't watched network television for probably 15 years. I don't even get network TV. I haven't had that for a long time. So it's all that streaming and premium cable stuff. that I get drawn to, and it's also stuff that has great cast. A lot of the great feature cast that I want to work with are doing those TV shows, so, and a lot of those same directors and writers too. So
there does seem to have been a sort of more of a shift of sort of film actors moving to sort of TV at the moment, and then sort of back in film. Whereas before it was like, oh no,
Big
TV
time.
was seen as like this thing, but now there's a lot more of that sort of dipping their toe in that world. Hopefully they'll not stay there and they'll still find the time to do.
They can do
films
both
and stuff, but I guess with the Netflix model, they don't have that sort of traditional off season over the summer where they'd have to film everything in that particular window. They can do it any time. So, hopefully that's it. Well, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. I mean, that's great. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Up next is Nicole Palo, the writer-director of Emma Peeters, the story which sees would-be actor Emma Peeters, who decides that she has reached the expiry date for women in her acting profession and will commit suicide on her 31st birthday. But Emma falls for Alex, the funeral director she asked to organise her funeral. So now we go behind the scenes with the making of this wonderful film. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming to Edinburgh. Your film is going to be screened at Emma Peeters here at the festival. What I wanted to know when I was watching this film is, what came first? Was it the character of Emma Peeters, or did you have the story first?
It was a character and a problem, both together, because the character's main, reason to exist is that she's frustrated that she cannot manage to, succeed as an actress, and decides to find the most radical solution is to, top it off, kill herself. And it was both together, the character and the situation, I'd say,
What's your kind of writing process for creating a character like Emma Peeters and then the story? Is it inspiration from your own life, or is it scenarios that you play out in your head? How do you sort of go from that to scripting?
Yeah, it's very personal. I like always to be able to connect personally to a story, otherwise I can't just write it at all. So what I did with Emma Peeters is I took all my flaws, and I just sort of put them all into a character and exaggerated it a bit, and it made this funny character. And I also enjoyed it because I could be ironic about myself, which I like a lot, to not take myself too seriously. Okay, it's personal, but
Do you think that's a sort of a European sensibility that we have, that we're always very self-deprecating? We put ourselves down before we build ourselves up?
I don't know if it's European, maybe so. I don't know.
When you were sort of kind of creating this thing, did you have someone in mind for Emma Peeters herself?
As an actress, you mean? No, but that was in fact my problem, is I couldn't really picture what she would look like, who would be the actress, and it took a long time before I found my Emma. We first had Belgian actresses, then we looked for French actresses, because there was also a story of co-production financing, so when we had this idea of co-producing with Canada, and it all came, falling really, really well, that I knew this actress, Monia Chokri. I had seen her in Xavier Dolan's film, and I thought she would really fit the part well, and she liked the script too, so it fit together.
Was there a moment when you were watching her act, you went, she is my Emma Peeters?
Yeah, it's the first one that I met right away by Skype, because she was in Montreal and I was in Brussels. I said, I think she's the one. And I had never had that feeling before, when I had seen others. I was like, yeah, she could do it, but there was no revelation really. So.
Did you always have in mind that you would direct this movie yourself, or was it one of those things like, I'm going to make the script and then kind of sell it?
I had to direct this one myself. As I said, it's personal. I couldn't imagine, because when you read the script, you don't have the full ideas behind it. I don't know, I had to do it myself. Really.
And because I think it's been sort of 10 years since your last directorial, was it sort of a nervous experience, or was it like, here we go, we're finally bringing this story to life?
It was too long, the struggle between the first and the second film. So partly it took a long time for me to write it, because it was difficult to find the right tone, between comedy and emotion. And then it was difficult to finance, because there's still a taboo about suicide, and is this tone going to work and whatever. So the whole process was really, really long. But instead of having me being bored with the story, I just became more and more obsessed by it. and it was giving me more frustration, so more inspiration to write it, so it just, I've been eating and sweating Emma Peeters for 7 years, so I'm happy now that it's out.
What do you think would have been different if the financing had come really early, like your second or third draft of the script, and went, right, off you go, make it with to now?
Sorry, you want to...
Oh, no, that's
the film would not have been as good, I think, because the first version of the script was not as good as now, and the fact that I had to always go back and improve the script because people were not convinced, it forced me to improve, go further, also in the more psychological reasons to why I wrote this story. Because although it's a comedy, I had to do sort of a therapy nearly to, not a real therapy, but an analysis of myself to understand my character, so it was a real trip, I don't know how you call it, ego trip maybe.
You were saying that there was maybe some nerves or something from people about maybe getting involved in this film. Was it sort of talking about suicide, for example? Was that maybe gave some investors some pause, was it? Or was that something that wasn't actually going to be a problem for them?
They don't always say why they say no. You're guessing maybe this or maybe that. For example, we were wanting to co-produce with France, but we never got the money in France. And for some reason, each time I sent my script, a version of my script, to a producer, distributor, there was a attack, terrorist attack in Paris. So the guy receives, because my original title was The Suicide of Emma Peeters. So they would receive this script called The Suicide of Emma Peeters while France was, mourning for the terrorist attack. So it wasn't really the right moment to come laughing about, death and stuff. So I think we had bad timing sometimes. And the French, they don't appreciate the ironic, sarcastic humor as much as, let's say, Belgians, maybe. I think here you have
I think we definitely
kind of
do,
humor. Or Scandinavia has it too, and Canada, I discovered they understood it well. But France, it didn't really fit, I guess. But I'm guessing because nobody wrote that down saying we refuse your script because we don't like that kind of humor. They didn't say it.
What I really liked about the film is that it plays with a lot of different tones. That I love that it had like an opening credits sequence, and then there's that black and white little montage where it's a silent film and stuff. And I thought it was all really very creative. What was that like for you when you're kind of devising the film? Do you sort of see those little vignette moments, or is it something that comes with the sort of development stage?
Yeah, it's both, because some of the ideas were already in the script, like the musical sequence, the Bergman scene, it was already in the script, but some of it came during editing. We discovered that it was a lot of fun to have the character of Emma, who wants to be an actress, to live her fantasy, believing she's in a film. It helped also understand that the suicide is not to be taken first degree. It's more like a fantasy she has of imagining herself dying and whatever. And also, it's funny because I made a video pitch, during financing. It's like you take excerpts of films you like and you tell your story and you just give the mood of your film. And I saw it recently again, and it's funny because it was a mix of black and white, old films, new films, color. So everything was there, in fact. But it was a bit unconscious. I don't know. I didn't write in my script, this scene is going to be in black and white, this one is going to be in color, this one is going to be silent. No, it wasn't even decided all. But somehow it was there.
What were those sort of films that did influence you kind of going into this film? What were you watching, reading that you thought, this is something that's inspiring me? What?
Pretty much everything was inspiring to me, but I would say there's the Nouvelle Vague, of course, that you have this feeling of 60s jazz in the film. That's definitely there. And also this independent American films, which I like a lot. I like the series Girls, for example, that came into, of course, there's Woody Allen, my model of kind of humor I really like. He takes the neurosis of people and makes fun of it, so that I really liked.
I saw that in the sort of the program guide, they talk about it draws comparisons with things like Frances Ha and so on. Do you feel that we're getting more movies like Emma Peeters, Frances Ha, etc., where it's putting sort of that white middle class characters, putting them in sort of situations, especially sort of female characters that have been often overlooked and often been given just the wife role and so on. Now they are the lead actor and character in their film, more of now.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more and more of these female characters, because everyone knows the industry has been more male oriented, and I think the female characters were stereotypical, and now since there are more women making films, we're going to see more different kinds of women. It's not going to be one kind of woman, it's going to be all kinds of different women.
That seems to be reflected in the film festival so far. I mean, it's 42% of the films here have been directed by women,
good.
Which is, when you think of what the actual industry standard is for how much goes out, it seems to be doing that, and you see it reflected in a lot of the films, different characters, different backgrounds. What's it like for you to be part of a festival which is looking to address that gender balance?
Yeah, I'm very happy that finally we're having a little more recognition and also distribution, having been able to show the films. So no, I'm very happy, and my struggle is not only to be screened in the festival, but to come and defend my film also, because we're not always invited to show the film. So, but I insist on coming and showing the film, because I think it's important for the people to also see who made the film. You know, because you read a name you don't know, but if you see the person, a woman is able to make a film. So I think it's important to be there.
How did you feel at 35 when you, obviously this character decides at 35, I'm ending it, I'm 32, so I'm starting to think I've got 3 more years. What was it like for you as a creative talent at 35? Did you feel that you were having a positive career, or was there any sort of dark thoughts that you perhaps ever had?
I'm the kind of person who gives myself deadlines. I thought I would make my first feature film when I was 30, which I did. I don't believe how I did it, but I managed. And my second film, I was supposed to do it when I was 35. And I'm 40, nearly 42 now. I made it when I was 40, so it took me 5 years more. So you can imagine the stress between 35 and 40. Not being able to meet my deadline. No, I'm this kind of person who put myself into too much stress. No, so I think 35, it's symbolic of a lot of things. For women, it's the age where you're supposed to start to think of having your own family, kids, and whatever, which I didn't do. I'm precise. I didn't do. But and you're supposed to have arrived somewhere in your career, you know? You're supposed to have achieved something. If, I don't know, you're a journalist at 35, you have to say, okay, I'm a journalist. But not being able, that's the case of Frances Ha as well. And
I thought, the line gets it. I should be doing what I'm meant to be doing by now, or something like that.
But I don't really do it, or something. Yeah. What was the line? I love that line.
I can't remember. I know it off the top of my head. It's one of my favourite. And how do you think audiences are going to kind of meet this film? Is it something that they're going to perhaps relate to? What are kind of the audience's reactions so far, and what do you expect kind of bringing it here to Britain?
Yeah, I think people up to now, because I've been showing it in different countries, in Italy,
seems to have had travelled all around the world.
Yeah, Sweden and the States also, and everywhere people react very well. I think people need to laugh, they need to see a positive, but at the same time they need to be touched on something that they can relate to. And I think what Emma Peeters is living, it's not only an actress failing to become, an actress, it's also anyone who's trying to break through in society. Just, existing, having their place and being able to do what they want to do, and so many people can't do it, and it can be because they're foreigners, because they're homosexual, I don't know, it can be from any kind of reason why you feel like you don't fit in,
It feels universal, because you think of sort of my generation, for example, where we all grew up thinking we'd have this by this age, homeowners and stuff, whereas that sort of generation has been like, we're not doing what we ever anticipated doing. We're maybe doing that lower job and stuff. And when you saw that Emma Peeters, you think, her doing an advert, that is a huge success, but it never sort of follows up from that. And most of us are probably at that, whatever career, we've done the advert and stuff like that, and we'll kind of can carry on with that.
Yeah, and if you have bigger dreams, which is Emma's case, you can only say, okay, this life? That's not what I thought it was going to be. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
That's the question the film asks. Is your life worth living although you didn't achieve your dreams? And the answer is, you have to see the film.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. So now that Emma Peeters is kind of travelling around the world, what's going to be next for the film once it's probably finished its festival circuit?
The film was already released in Canada and Belgium.
Excellent.
Theatrically, and now it's going to be VOD, DVD, and all kinds of things. What I'm hoping for is that we can have distribution in other countries also. We have, South Korea and China who bought it. I don't know. That's funny for me. And some Eastern country as well bought the film. But for example, having it come out in UK would be great. We don't have yet a distribution deal, but it could maybe.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed. And what's next for yourself once Emma Peeters? It's been something that you've been with for a while. Are you ready to let it go and move on to something else, or are you already kind of, the wheels are moving on something?
I'm writing at the moment because it takes such a long time. I need to write fast, so in hopefully less than 10 years I can make the next one. But the next one I'm going to write is going to be in the same kind of style, because I figured if I want to do it fast, it better be in the same style so I can tell people, okay, I can prove that I'm able to do this kind of film. And it's going to be also existential comedy drama, kind of, about a girl growing up between 5 years old and 20, and with the question, the sentence of Simone de Beauvoir, one is not born a woman, but becomes one, So that's the idea. It will be called Girlhood or something like that.
Excellent. I'm already looking forward to that one. Well, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best with Emma Peeters. It's a fantastic film. I really enjoyed it, and it put a smile on my face the other day. So, yeah, all the best. Cheers.
Yeah.
Boys in the Wood opened the film festival, and it's about a trio of teenage rogues who are given one last chance to turn their lives around by completing the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which involves a trek across the Highlands. However, they aren't as alone as they think, and soon are being stalked by wealthy aristocrats who intend to hunt and kill them for sport, and they only have their wits and wills to protect them. The film's writer and director Ninian Doff and star Dickie talk with me about the making of this film on the red carpet for the opening night.
The Edinburgh Film Festival is like an incredible festival in its own right, so prestigious regardless, but for me, this is, we're a few minutes from the flat I grew up in when I was a child, and now I'm standing here in this beautiful theatre, being the opening film, and it's also a festival. I used to get a press pass when I was like a 13-year-old to this festival and make little video diaries on a VHS camera, and it's really the festival that I, binged films and fell in love with cinema, and so to have my film here anyway, but for it to be my opening film and then for it to be the opening film, it's just extraordinary.
And how did you combine the ideas of doing like a DOV trip and then having like class tensions and like a duke dressed up as the like Queen's husband?
Well, it's sort of it's funny. It expanded out into sort of a very wild and hopefully surprising and anarchic story, but it did begin with sort of the one sentence was some boys in the Duke of Edinburgh Award and find themselves being hunted by a duke, and that was the beginning point, and then that unfolded into this kind of crazy story about identity and also like sort of I guess social politics and where we are today, and just we're still going on right now. We've got Extinction Rebellion who are like kicking off the whole thing of like we are. The youth of today just have to, should have had enough, quite rightly have had enough, and there are a lot of sort of arrogant, privileged older people who are telling everyone to be quiet and accept it. And so within the context of an outrageous comedy, I wanted to make a sort of sneak in a strong subversive political kick to be like, take over, kids.
It's a good message.
Yeah.
Obviously the film really killed at South by Southwest with like American audiences. How do you think Scottish audiences are going to connect with these characters and the story and seeing sort of the Highlands so beautifully presented on screen?
Well, it'd be ironic if it doesn't go well here, because the worry for me was America. Like, it's a Duke of Edinburgh Award is hyper specific to the UK, and then it's Scottish accent. It was very important to me that it was Scottish accent, and it wasn't compromising on those things. So when it was at its world premiere at South by Southwest Festival, and when they invited it and it was the opening like midnight movie, I was like, that's cool, because I didn't sort of know if anyone would get it outside Scotland or whatever this. And the Americans, you know, it won the audience award, they fell in love with it, the reviews were amazing. So that was so exciting to think like, oh cool, it's not too niche, it's not this. So in theory now we're coming to the audience who I thought, oh yeah, they're gonna get it, you know what I mean? Further abroad was a wild card and they all really responded. So I think it's going to be really fun. I think everyone's going to get twice as hard. And then yeah, hopefully I didn't want to do like cliched Highlands, you know, I call it the anti-bagpipe film. I didn't want like, you know, lovely violins and all that, so it's a blasting hip-hop soundtrack over Scottish Highlands, which for me was how I remembered it as a teenager with my headphones on, so I thought that's what I wanted to put on the screen. It felt a bit more interesting and true. Yeah, I mean, Scotland's like, I mean, it's not even new news, it's been happening for quite a few years now. Like, the industry is just going through the roof. Like, it's funny, when we were crewing up this film, you struggle to find a crew sometimes, because it's a great problem to have. Like, there's so much work going on in Scotland, and the crews are so good and all that. And I know it's only growing with the studio coming and all the stuff coming into it. So it's exciting, and like for me as well, I grew up, born and bred in Scotland, grew up here, but then, you know, then I left and I've lived all over the world in different places. And but for my first film, I really adamantly wanted to go back to Scotland, I wanted to write the Scottish voice and all that, and I was like, I kind of felt like it'd been a while since I'd seen a really forward-looking Scottish film that was sort of like energetic and just let Scottish people be funny. They're the funniest people ever, coolest voice ever, best swearing ever. So I kind of didn't want to make anything that was too somber or gritty, but I was like, oh my god, I just want to really alive and exciting Scottish film, because that's what I guess what I was kind of pining for and missing whenever I leave. So yeah, I think it's great. It's just great.
You're one of Scotland's most diverse actors, you know, big blockbusters, small indie movies. What was it that attracted you to this movie and being able to film in the Highlands?
Oh God, so many things. I just love the script so much. It's just something that you can't put into any category at all. And I loved, Ninian and I met up and had a coffee, and I just loved him. So the script and Ninian really, and also the plus of getting to film like in Perthshire and different locations, which was lovely. But yeah, this script's really unique. It's got a beautiful blend of real laugh out loud humour, but also really some really beautiful tender moments and lovely kind of, yeah, you'll see it anyway, but I loved it when I saw the casting crew. I just thought it was mad and brilliant and kind of so much energy, so yeah, I was really excited for it to be here tonight.
Definitely.
Scotland's got such a great history and we love our kind of black, dark stories and humour that, yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a great thing to do.
Sorry, how is it different from your other films?
Oh God, I just think it's really hard to kind of explain it, you know, because it just when you think it can't get any wilder, it does. And by the end of it, you're just like, what was that? I just loved it. There's something, as I said before, anarchic about it. It just doesn't fit into anything. And yeah, I love that about it. And to be so lovely, and it's great for Ninian, who's like really worked to get this film off the ground and, you know, make it a really great edit. And also the four boys are the stars of the film. They are brilliant in it. So I'm just chuffed to bits that they're having an experience like this with the film. They were at South by Southwest as well, and it got picked, I think, as the audience winner of the midnight section. So they got an extra screening and stuff, so they've had a really exciting time and deservedly so.
And what's next for you?
So I've got another film, Tell It to the Bees, which is set in a small 50s village in Scotland. It's coming out, I think, in July, and it's a love story between two women in 1950s Scotland in a small village. I'm not one of the two women. I'm a kind of homophobic, very closed, judgmental kind of sister-in-law of one of them. And also, what else have I got? something else.
Too busy to remember.
I've got another film shown at the festival called Balance, Not Symmetry.
Oh, yeah.
So that's on the 23rd. And I'm just keeping busy, which is always a joy as a jobbing freelance actor, you know.
Lots of Scottish films too.
Yeah, which has been lovely. I feel like there feels like there's more happening up here now, and which is, you know, so welcome. We've got a lot of talent, not just in front of the camera, but with crews and, you know, from all over the industry. And it just, you know, I want these film studios built. I want, you know, so much for Scotland. So we've got a great potential to do even better. But Boyz in the Wood is, I'm really proud of Ninian and pleased for them. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.